What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Friday, March 15th, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil for episode 267. Phil, I went down to the Lone Star State. I returned in one piece. It was a good time. Good time to see John down where he's been living for 8-9 years, something like that. I think he moved down there in 2016. And according to him, I was his first friend that actually visited him down in Texas.
I think that just says a lot about John, you know?
Or Texas, or both.
Or Texas.
Yeah, one or the other.
It also doesn't help that, we're all still pretty much in Western New York. And when there's only one friend that's far away, usually they're the one that has to travel up versus us travel down.
Yeah, that happens. Went to the rodeo on Monday.
Okay, is that your first?
First official rodeo.
Was that your first rodeo?
First official rodeo,
then,
yes.
So can you say now officially that you've been to the rodeo? As in, like, you know the saying when it's not my first rodeo? Now it literally will not be your first rodeo because you've had it.
It will be my second rodeo if I go again.
Because you've had your first rodeo. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. We went to Minute Maid Park where Houston Astros play and did a tour of that stadium. The Savannah Bananas had played there Sunday, I think it was, Saturday or Sunday. And what the Houston Astros do, because they actually play on real grass, they tear up their grass and redo it every year. So when we were there, they were in the process of tearing it all up because the Savannah Bananas were the last team and activity in that ballpark to use that field. And it was we didn't get to go behind the manual scoreboard. We didn't get a manual scoreboard. I think I said it right the first time. We didn't get to go in the dugout, and we weren't able to go on the warning track or the field, all because they were working on it. But it was a weird but cool experience seeing no grass on a ballpark. It was really, really weird.
I'm surprised they would wait this long to put up the new stuff. I understand they want to get as many events in as they can before putting the new stuff down. I'm sure they want to use it just for the Astros, but it's coming up pretty quick. I'm surprised they would wait this long to get the new stuff in. That seems like you're cutting it close. I mean, I know they're professionals. I'm sure they will handle it without a problem. There's plenty of time left. It's not like it's tomorrow or anything, but still seems closer than I would like it to be, but I'm sure they will be just fine.
Yeah, they said they actually delayed it 1 week because of the Savannah Bananas that were there during spring break, I think he said it was. So that's why they push it off one more week. But yeah, I mean, down there, you got to remember, it's always nice out. True. I think they do it this time so that it lasts the full, summer and doesn't die. But yeah, it does seem like it, because I saw them tearing it up. I was like, don't they play in like 3 weeks? But they said it should be shipping any minute, and it should only be like a 1 to 2 week process. But it costs them $1.2 million to do this every single year.
See, that is a lot of money, but knowing how much the players make and how much baseball makes, it pretty much is nothing. But at the same time, good for them for spending. I mean, that's still a lot of money to spend every single year on a field. So still, kudos to them for not just putting in turf or if, using the same grass over and over and over. I'm sure there's other real grass stadiums that don't shell out $1.2 million every single season to get new grass. So good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, but it was a good time. Made it back in one piece, and that's why you're listening to me right now. So if you have also been to Texas and want to share your experiences, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil's article dropped on Tuesday. Guess what? I didn't have an article this week, but I did drop the power rankings. It's just a picture, so go look at that. It's really quick, easy read. I don't have very many words in it. And then look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. We will start with the Buffalo Sabres. Somehow, Phil, they're playing as we're recording right now at 8 o'clock on Thursday. They're facing the Islanders, and they're somehow similar to the Bills where I buried them, and now they're back from the dead. They're 5 points out going into this Islanders game of the second wildcard spot, and it's mind-blowing. But Tuesday versus Detroit, we said they weren't scoring, and they definitely scored 7-3. Tuck Byram had 2. Benson, Skinner, Clifton, and Paterka were the goal scorers. UPL 21 of 24 save shots were 39-24 in favor of the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, this is the kind of game to me that there's like a needle in a haystack that you find every once in a while. I know they recently had a game against the Knights where they put up a lot of goals, but prior to that, they really haven't put up. I mean, 7's an insane amount, but I mean, for the longest time now, we've been asking them to consistently get 2 or even 3 goals. So I don't know. This game seemed like everything was working in their favor, and not just things were falling, but they were also outworking Detroit by a lot. And I'm pretty shocked to see Detroit not play that well in a game that realistically was a must-win for them to stay in their own playoff hunt. I know they're, I believe, still ahead of the Sabres, but at the same time, like, that's a game that they need to win, and they did not. And they not only didn't win, it just didn't look like they were really playing all that well. I thought the Sabres completely outplayed the Red Wings. I was just double-checking real quick to make sure they didn't play a back-to-back. They did not. They had a couple days off before that game against the Sabres, so just strange to me to see Detroit play that poorly and the Sabres just completely outplay them as well as they did. But as far as the offense goes, it really did seem like just everything was working. I mean, they were collecting rebounds. They were scoring on those rebounds. They were scoring from kind of far out. They were scoring through the legs. Like, everything that could go right for the offense was going right. Even Byram had a couple goals, so not even just the offense. But as far as goal scoring goes, everything seemed to be really flowing that game. But again, a lot of it was hustle on second opportunities, rebound opportunities, good setup. So not trying to take everything away from them. It was still a good win against a team that was, in a desperate mode to win, to keep their own playoff hopes alive. So pretty dominant victory as far as that goes, and really good to see the offense have a big explosive game like this.
Yeah, Detroit was on a 6-game winning streak, and they're in a current 6-game losing streak now. So they have been struggling for a while, but like you said, they're trying to keep their playoff hopes alive. But 4-1 after the first period, 7-2 after the second. They scored just a minute 07 into the game. That has been the difference for the Buffalo Sabres. It seems like a lot this season is getting up early. And if they're able to get up early, they can more play their style. I thought this was Zach Benson's best game. I think him and Greenway have a good connection. Greenway and Tage both went 0-2-2. But it's more about what's coming up on the schedule. And yes, there's still a certain amount of games back, but you're facing a bunch of teams down the stretch that you're trying to chase. Like I said, you got New York on Thursday, but then you got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-game road trip. You're facing Detroit once again. That's another huge game. But then you're out west versus Seattle, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. But then you're home, and there's a bunch of winning games here. You got 2 more against Detroit. You got Philly, who's ahead of you. You got Washington twice, who's ahead of you. You got Tampa Bay once, who's ahead of you. So you still got an opportunity to pull this in. But here's some numbers from Buffalo Sabres stats on X. Before January 1st and after. Here are the 2 differences. Before January 1st, 3.45 goals against per game, which was 25th in the league. 896 save percentage on 5-on-5, which is 31st in the league. And they were 15, 19, and 4. They were getting about 45% of their points, which was 27th in the league. Since January 1st, 2.36 goals against, 4th in the league. 9.37 save percentage on 5-on-5 play, 3rd in the league, and they're 16, 11, and 1, getting about 59% of their points, which is good for 14th. This is why we say that the beginning of the season, you can't be dropping that many games in a row because it ends up haunting you in the end. This is another reason why I'm so frustrated, because this is the type of play and performance that we should have been seeing from the Buffalo Sabres from the get-go. If we had been seeing some of this similar play, you wouldn't be in this position where you're chasing points and trying to catch up. Yes, there are a bunch of teams ahead of you that have the same amount of losses as you, but you're so far behind in points because you couldn't even get it to overtime. That's been the issue. But I guess looking at the players, Phil, it's looking like this Byram kid is a legit player, and he has turned something on with this team where their offense is playing much better with him in the lineup than with him out of it, and it's a weird thing with adding a defenseman and getting more scoring.
I think it's just the way, I mean, you mentioned it for the power play, I think, on our last episode with him literally circling the entire ice, watching all these other players not really move from their positions too much while he's just going every single place on the ice. And then even I think it was his second goal in this game, he's right on the crease. He was picking up a rebound, he was just right on the goal crease, and that is from a defenseman. Even Dahlin, I think it was right on his hip. And again, so you have two defensemen playing right in front of the goalie, one scooping up a rebound and scoring, one just right there. I think just the way he has injected himself, his skating, his moving, I think he's just really brought some life to the entire team. I think they're seeing his youth, seeing his speed, and kind of like remembering what they were and what they had. I feel like they were just so stagnant of an offense for the longest time. And now that he's here, I'm not saying that he's necessarily generating all the offense, but like you said, I think he like zipping around the ice, like just showing his speed, his youth. I think it's just brought something out of these players where they're like, oh my gosh, we can play fast and good. We have that ability. Let's try it out now that he's here. And he's just kind of like, I feel like it's just reminding them what it's like to play with speed, play with pace. And that's the offense that we saw a lot last year. I mean, even scoring 7 goals, I was kind of watching the game like, this is great, but this is what they used to do all the time. Like last year, it was 4, 5, 6 goals a game, and it was exciting every single time. Like, this is what the style of hockey they used to play last year without the goaltending and defense kind of following up. And then this year, their offense just, like I said, just like pretty much went to sleep. And now that Byram's here, I don't want to say, like you said, that like he's necessarily generating all the offense, but the team is definitely following his lead, which is insane for a player that just got here. But like you said, also kind of represents a little bit of the culture that is currently developing for the Sabres, which is not good. But the fact that he's here and kind of bringing what he saw from Colorado and just bringing his youth and excitement, I think it really has generated some buzz for the entire lineup. And I think it is really changing things for the team.
And as they're placing New York Islanders right now, chasing them, they just took a 1-0 lead with 5 minutes in the second period. Victor Olofsson just scored. So your folk hero has scored once again. But yeah, since we last talked, they jumped Pittsburgh, they jumped New Jersey. So that's beneficial. But the disadvantage, they have one of the most they have played one of the most, I don't know how to phrase this, Phil. They have played a lot of games. They've played 66 games. The teams they're facing right now have played fewer. So you're trying to play catch up in points while the opponents have those games in hand over you. So I'm not fully bought back in yet. My interest is perked, but you have to still go on a little bit of a winning streak here. You still have to gather these points because, one, you're still points behind. Two, games in hand you don't have. You're still chasing Washington, who you're 2 points back. Washington's got 2 games in hand. You're facing Detroit later on. I believe it's Saturday or Sunday. You're 5 points back of them. They have 1 game in hand. You're facing the Islanders right now. 2 games in hand with the Islanders, and they're up 5 points. So it's possible, but you have to go on a long run here. You can't just be doing 3 and then lose 1, 3 and then lose 1. You got to win like 5 and then lose 1. But this next stretch of games here that they have coming up is very, very important. If they're able to take a full 2 points and not go to overtime with New York or Detroit, they can get themselves back in. And yeah, it's Saturday at 12:30 before we head to the Bandits game. But if they're able to get these 2 points here versus New York, and Saturday get those 2 points against Detroit, you have a shot. You have a realistic shot to make the playoffs, which, going into our last episode, which we recorded last Saturday, I would not have given them any type of prayer to make it. But not only are they getting help, on their own schedule where they're winning games and getting the points that they need to, but they're getting help around the league as well, which is definitely helping them. But yeah, they have to get to like 92 points, and it's still a stretch for them to make it, but at least it's going to be a little bit more interesting. Maybe they'll have some meaningful games down the stretch, but I'm not fully bought back in, but my interest is perked.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just going to end up frustrating. Like I feel like they're doing what they always do, which is what all Buffalo teams seem to do, which is get your hopes really high toward the end of the season to watch them not make it by, even if they get within 5 points at the end of the season and at the end of the year of a playoff spot, it's just going to be
letdown,
ridiculously depressing with how terrible they played. Like you mentioned, all those stats in the first half of the season, that's all, that's all you needed. Like, I feel like they're just going to get so close again, not make it, and we're just going to be frustrated that they should have made it, and also that they didn't. I mean, yes, Byram's been quite the boost to the lineup, so I'm not saying that trade, but outside of that, I mean, you didn't even try at the deadline. You haven't tried, like we mentioned, not even just the deadline, the entire season. You haven't done anything to give this team any support when they needed offense or any kind of boost, any kind of help. Like, they just got nothing. And I mean, a lot of it's on the team to simply play better because they weren't playing very well, but the management also didn't do much to assist this team with their issues that they were having. And now if you miss it by just a couple points, it's going to be just frustrating more than anything that they realistically should have made playoffs. They have the team that they're showing now that could have made playoffs, and once again, you could be on the outside looking in. But I don't know. For now, we will try to stay positive. I'm in agreement with you where I'm just not officially bought back in because, like you mentioned, one loss through all of this, and you're pretty much toast still. So you have to keep winning. It's something they haven't really done a lot of this season, which is string wins together, and that's what they need to do now. We've been asking them to do that literally all season, and they have not been able to. So we'll see if they can pull it off. I mean, it'd be one heck of a stretch run. I think they're getting the goaltending and defense you need. The offense just have to follow. So is it possible? Sure. Am I ready to, like you mentioned, have some meaningful games at the very end of the season here and then watch them not make it? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, get the 2 points from New York Islanders, get the 2 points from Detroit, and we will reevaluate on Sunday when we record again to see if we're bought back in yet. I still don't think I can get bought back in just because you're still, like I've been saying multiple times already, you're chasing games points and they get games in hand. So we will reevaluate where we're sitting and where we're at on the Monday episode. But we'll move forward to the Buffalo Bills free agency officially open on Wednesday. The tampering period opened on Monday, so you got a lot of news out there. Let's go over the 3 new faces that the Buffalo Bills brought in, and we can talk about them for real quick because I don't have a ton to say about any of these guys. Two wide receivers and a linebacker. Matt Collins comes over from Atlanta on a 1-year deal. Nick Morrow comes in as a linebacker. He kind of replaces that Tyrell Dodson type of role on a 1-year deal. And then just recently, before we started recording, Curtis Samuel comes down, 3-year deal, coming over from the Washington Commanders, a player that the fan base has kind of been coveting ever since he left Carolina, was in a free agent back then as well. But he's probably the biggest of the 3 names out there and probably will have the most meaningful impact on this team this coming up year.
Yeah, the other 2, for the most part, I mean, Hollins, I've seen compared to Gabe Davis just in like his size, his route running, what he can do, what he brings. He had a good year, not last year, but the year before. He had a pretty good year, similar to a Gabe Davis type year. I think he's just going to be your kind of depth wide receiver. I mean, you mentioned it already, like Hollins and Morrow come in on 1-year deals, so they are essentially depth players that you're not really expecting a ton of, but hope to get some production out of. And then Curtis Samuel, 3 years, so that is the bigger signing, also for $15 million guaranteed and 24 overall. So that's just in general the much bigger signing. But I think it's gonna be interesting to see what they do with Samuel. I mean, obviously he is the slot kind of wide receiver that the Bills have been missing since Beasley left. So we'll see what he can bring and what he brings to an offense when he's not with Washington. That yes had a, I'm pretty sure, pretty good season offensively with Sam Howell, but for the most part, they're not Josh Allen. So we'll see what he brings and like what the Bills can actually do with him, what kind of gadget plays they get him, how good he is in the slot. But you and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand. As far as bringing in 2 wide receivers, we still think that they are badly missing a wide receiver too, but at the same time, this is supposed to be one of the deepest wide receiver draft classes in a long time. So I hope, really, really, really hope that they go out and find themselves a wide receiver 2 in the draft class, maybe even 2 wide receivers or something. They need a wide receiver 2 pretty badly. A young one coming out of college would be fantastic, but I could also see them just, drafting 6 defensive players for, why not? Why not?
Yeah, I would. We'll riot. The city of Buffalo will burn to the ground if they draft a defensive player with the first round pick. It can't happen. I think I like both of these signings, as Sabres just scored once again, Dylan Cousins, so they're up 2-0 versus the Islanders. But I don't think this takes them out of the wide receiver matchup because Matt Collins, I relate him more towards the Trent Sherfield than the Gabe Davis. I understand the comparison between the two of player style, but I think he's going to be ideally, he should be your fifth wide receiver on this team. Curtis Samuel, I think, is coming in. I think he'll get the edge over Shakir, but I like the type of player that he is. I think him and Shakir are similar to an extent where if you get the ball in their hands, they can make magic happen. And I think they're adding pieces to this. They brought back Ty Johnson. You can kind of move forward to who else they brought in. Quentin Morris comes back, but at a lesser extent. The other three that we'll be talking about quickly are the defenders. But I like the type of players they're bringing in. I think they just still have a lot of work to go. But I do like the Samuel signing quite a bit. I was a bit shocked at seeing how much they paid him, but the more research I did, that's along the lines, maybe even slightly less than what was projected. And I mean, even looking at Gabe Davis, he was making $13 million with the Jaguars. So it's stupid season, Phil. It's stupid season. We say it all the time, but they're still one wide receiver two away from me being more comfortable with what this team looks like. I think they're going to bring in a more veteran running back to go behind Ty Johnson like they've done in the past. I think they're still another wide receiver short. I think they're going to bring in a lot more offensive linemen because that's light there. And then you flip over to the defensive side who they brought back. Cam Lewis is brought back. Maybe he is one of your starting safeties. Maybe he is your backup behind Taron Johnson again. You brought back Daquan Jones, which I think is a huge bring back. I was very nervous when the free agency tampering period opened up and Daquan Jones didn't have the deal yet. I woke up, I think it was Tuesday morning, and they officially announced 2 more years with him. AJ Epinesa has got 2 more years. So you brought back some key pieces on the defensive side of the ball, but you still need another edge rusher, maybe 2. You still need at least 1, maybe 2 defensive tackles. You're probably going to need another cornerback. You're probably going to see another safety on the board. Sabres just scored again, Zach Benson, so they're up 3-0. It's crazy what's happening right now. But I still think, I honestly think that the offense is a bit further along in this offseason, and it's only it's Friday, so 3 days officially into the free agency, so they got a ways to go. But I actually think that the offense is a bit further along than the defense is, and that is definitely scaring me a little bit because the next big step is the draft.
Yeah, and some of the players that kind of took off, I didn't really expect to leave. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand, but Tyrell Dobson, not knowing what his contract looks like, I mean, he had a really good season in the absence of pretty much every linebacker for the Bills, so if he was able to get paid, good for him. But even Dane Jackson, obviously he was a bit of a depth guy here, but to see him take off when the Bills kind of need cornerback help or at least something out there,
Money.
Especially, I mean, you've lost Jackson and White now. Obviously, White was injured, and we don't have to go into why he left or anything like that, but like you're missing 2 of your 4 cornerbacks from last year. I know you got Douglas back there, and now you have, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Not Bernard. Benford, there it is. So you got some options, and the biggest thing for a lot of these players to me that I'm excited about with some of them leaving is that they're getting younger again. I think we've mentioned it how many times that last year was their pretty much final year before Josh Allen's contract kicked in, but not only that, but like the final year really with the core of this team that's been here for so many years, and now it is time to essentially overhaul your roster quite a bit, get younger, get, just more youth out there. Yes, it's going to be some growing pains, but a lot of these guys, even Dane Jackson was getting up there in age. Tyrell Dobson, I'm pretty sure was still pretty young, but Jordan Poyer, like you mentioned a while ago, was getting up there in age. Morris getting up there in age. Gabe Davis just didn't really pan out here. So honestly, to me, I'm excited about a lot of these moves because I'm excited to see this team getting younger and rebuilding because I think they still have the pieces to be a very competitive team while they rebuild. And I think they already found a lot of those players from last year with all the injuries on the defensive side that they were able to find some nuggets on this roster that I don't think anyone really believed they had until they were thrown into certain situations and kind of excelled. You're like, oh, okay, this guy can really play. So like you mentioned, I think the offense is much more settled than the defense, and the defense still has a lot of work to do, but overall, I'm excited to see them getting younger, even if it's going to come with possibly some growing pains over the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think the Curtis Samuel signing is probably going to be the biggest splash signing that you see in this offseason. I think there's probably going to be a few more depth pieces, maybe a guy or two brought back that is still sitting out there that the Bills let go or is just UFA right now. But I think there might be a bit of a lull here like there typically is. I think there'll be a second wave of signings probably this weekend, maybe into early next week, and then it'll kind of go more quiet up until the draft. And then after the draft ends, you'll get more of a wave of guys that, if you couldn't get a wide receiver in the first round or the second round or whatever it is, players will go and get like a Mike Williams or an Odell Beckham, those big name guys, or the running backs. If you don't get a running back in the draft where you want, you'll go get a Zeke or a J.K. Dobbins or a Clyde Edwards-Helaire or any of those bigger name guys. So I think you'll hit more of a lull here of signings. Like I said, maybe a few more. Maybe you'll get an offensive lineman somewhere in here. Maybe you'll get a defensive end somewhere in here, another defensive tackle, like the positions that you absolutely need to fill out. And again, they're going to bring 90 guys to camp regardless. So Matt Collins might not even make the team. Morrow might not make the team. Ty Johnson, Quentin Morris might not make the team. Just because you're signing now doesn't guarantee that you're going to be making the team. I think Curtis Samuel is going to make the team with the guaranteed money, but you know what I mean? They're bringing 90 guys to camp regardless, so I think that's a big thing to remember. But, yeah, they lost a bunch of guys, so maybe some compensatory picks are coming next year. But, Phil, before we move on to the Buffalo Bandits preview, let's dive into our first sponsor of Tap That Tap Room.
You were talking about the Houston Astros. You just really switched into baseball.
Got baseball on the mind, apparently.
But yes, our first ever sponsor, still Tap That Tap Room at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They have a jam-packed weekend coming up of events on Friday. That is today, if you're listening to this on Friday. They have an unbranded, totally bootleg Child Wizard Trivia at 7:30 p.m. We aren't going to say the name because they don't want to say the name, but if you think of wizards, you know what kind of trivia it is. They're also going to be brewing up some special Polyjuice potion that day as well. Sounds like a lot of fun. And then Saturday, if you cannot make it to the Bandits game in person, they will have a Buffalo Bandits watch party. You can watch them take on the Toronto Rock, like we've mentioned multiple times. They have all the TVs on the Bandits game, and the sound will be up. So if you can't go to the game, go there and enjoy watching it.
You're a lizard, Larry.
There you go.
There's another hint for you. But Sunday is St. Patrick's Day, and they're going to be having a party. Where else would everyone want to be and be Irish than Tap That Tap Room? Join them for some food and drink specials and some amazing Irish music playing all night long. Speaking of some drinks on tap here, they got some Irish beers on tap. The Irish Red by Hamburg Brewing Company, St. Fatty's Irish Style Red Ale by Fatheads Brewery, and the Irish Gold by Sullivan's Brewing Company. Some really tasty selections if you're Irish, and even if you're not, put on some green and go down to Tap That Tap Room and pour some out of the tap on your own.
Yeah, everybody's Irish on Sunday, as they mentioned in Boondock Saints. Fantastic movie. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. But they also have 27 other beers, ciders, sours, seltzers, and malt beverages currently on tap. And you can check out what those are, what's on deck, and what events they have on their Facebook page and website. And also check out their food menu as well.
So let's dive into the Buffalo Bandits here. Trade deadline happened on Tuesday. There were 4 moves across the NLL. You saw Chris Wardell. He went from Colorado to San Diego. You saw, wow, why am I blanking? John Wagner. He went from the Vegas Golden Knights. Man, I'm still in Texas mode here, Phil. John Wagner went from Vegas to Albany, along with a third-round pick, I believe it was, for a practice player and a first-round pick. Went back to Las Vegas. You saw Taggart Clark go to New York from Philly, and Philly picked up Colorado's first overall pick from New York, who New York had. So that could end up being the first overall pick. Keep an eye on that one. And then Buffalo Bandits, of course, Steve Dietrich does make a trade. Paul Dawson comes over from Colorado. I picked the right team, just the wrong player. And a 2024 third-round pick, which belongs to New York did belong to New York. It's New York's third-round pick this coming up year. And Buffalo sent out the 2024 second-round pick of New York and the 2025 second-round pick of New York. So New York is involved in this all the way around. But Paul Dawson comes over from Colorado, used to be in Vancouver. I believe he had a short stay in San Diego as well. 260 games played in his career, 96 points, but 911 loose balls. Phil, a big bruising stay-at-home defenseman who has very veteran savviness to him and championship pedigree, comes over to Buffalo's back end that is desperately in need of defenseman help.
Like you mentioned, I think it's hilarious that New York's involved in pretty much every one of these trades with just picks flying all over the place that aren't theirs, that just all these other teams have acquired New York's picks, and they're just trading all of those picks between teams.
Oh, yeah.
It's so funny looking. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is necessarily the move I was hoping they would make. I know they need help on the defensive end with all of their injuries that they're going through. I do like the fact that he's a big defender. I like that he's a stay-at-home. My problem is, to me, this is the kind of move that if you're the Toronto Rock, this is the move you make to get some depth on your team for a championship run in case there's any injuries, in case you have some injuries, you want some added depth on your back end. I know, as you mentioned, everybody that traded, it really wasn't much. The NLL does not often trade too much, so especially at the trade deadline. So I understand, like, there probably just simply wasn't a lot out there. I'm sure Dietrich did his due diligence for everybody he could possibly try to acquire, but I'm sure teams just aren't really willing, especially this year with unified standings, with everybody pretty much still in it, minus a handful of teams. It was going to be tough to trade, good players away when all these teams still believe in their chances, except, you saw Colorado twice because they clearly think that they're out of it, which they pretty much are. But they were one of the few teams that really doesn't have a great shot at making playoffs. A lot of these other teams have a good shot, especially Rochester winning back-to-back games. They put themselves right back in the playoff race, and I was really hoping to steal some of their players as they were bottoming out, but now they are right back in it. So I think the trade market as a whole just really wasn't that much out there. So what the Bandits were able to get, I don't hate it, but in previous years when you can, get a Bomberry who completely changed that defense and was an incredible player, I think that's what I was a little bit more hopeful for, because the Bandits are in a, need to make playoff situation, not a comfortably sitting in a playoff situation. So I think I wanted something more to really push this team over the edge to make playoffs and get themselves on a good run. I think he is a good stay-at-home defender. I like that he's big, like you mentioned. He's a veteran, but it's not exactly what I was hoping for. But I'm glad they were able to get something for the defense to give them a little bit of help and depth as the season goes on.
Yeah, might as well bring another podcaster here to Buffalo. But the biggest worry that I have with this, you're kind of looking at the deals that went through. I think you summed it up perfectly. With the unified standings, there's benefits and there's disadvantages of it. The benefit of it is it's so competitive. Like, every game matters, and we've been saying that since the offseason when unified standings even came about, that you're never going to be truly out of it until you're truly out of it. But the disadvantage is when the trade deadline comes around, and we're not sitting here saying that the trade deadline is going to be like the NHL deadline or the NBA deadline. We're very realistic of what the NLL deadline looks like. And there were some bigger moves earlier in the year. There were some bigger moves in the offseason. So there have been a lot of trades that happen. Buffalo's made, 3 or 4 this year just alone. So I'm not really disappointed in the action that was done at the trade deadline. It's just more about when all these teams truly still believe they're in it, there's going to be less player movement as there was, as there could have been in previous years when Albany was trying to fight for one of those spots in the East, and when Vancouver or Las Vegas was trying to fight for a spot in the West last year. So I think that plays a big role into where there might not be as many players available as in years past, whether, that would have worked out in the end regardless. But the biggest concern I have with bringing a Paul Dawson in is he has, Phil, 260 games played in his career, 610 penalty minutes. That's my biggest concern with him, is this team has had spurts, and by spurts I mean the majority of the season, they have not been able to stay out of the box. And when you're bringing in a guy who has been known to not stay out of the box, whether it's physicality or taking dumb penalties or just being too overly aggressive or any of that kind of stuff, when you're bringing in another guy on top of a Nick Weiss who's got a lot of penalty minutes this year, on top of Steve Priolo, who has been known in the past to have tons of penalty minutes, that's the biggest concern I have. It's less about his age. It's less about his play on the field. It's more about, will he play his style of game but more disciplined and stay out of the box? Because if he gets into penalty trouble, this trade could come back to haunt the Buffalo Bandits, because they are a different team when they're not committing penalties. You saw what they were able to do with Saskatchewan, where they were able to win it in overtime. But you were also able to see what they were doing versus Albany twice this year, where they weren't be able to keep cool heads and stay out of the box, and it come back to haunt them. So if he can play that stay-at-home veteran defenseman and be that more leadership and take some responsibility off the Steve Priolos, off the Ian McKays, off the Nick Weisses, and take a bit of a load off of them while staying out of the box, I love the deal. But if he's coming in here and he's going to try to make a name for himself in front of Bandit Land, or he's trying to stick up for his teammates, or any of those stupid penalties that you might take in your first couple games with the Buffalo Bandits, that might come back to haunt them. So that's my only concern, is can he play disciplined lacrosse and stay out of the box? Because if he can do that, I still think he can be a very useful piece to this back end that is in desperate need of more pieces.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I like that he's not really a transition guy. I think they do need more, and I mean, this kind of also goes along with Bomberry missing, and we don't know how long he's going to be out for. The last thing we had kind of heard rumors of was at best March, possibly not this season. So we have really no idea what Bomberry's up to, when he's going to be back, if he's going to be back. You also are missing the Robinsons. This team is very, very injured right now. I mean, mainly on the back end, which is kind of good. But, I mean, bringing a player like this in, I'm happy that he's a shutdown defenseman and not really as much of a transition guy, which is rare for me to say, because I love my transition players. But I think the Bandits really just need some extra help on the defense. Like you said, if he can stay out of the penalty box, I think he is that big body shutdown defenseman that can hopefully step in there and just play some solid D with Priolo and the other guys back there.
So let's go over the previous game this year, because Buffalo has faced Toronto shockingly already this season. January 27th, 2024. They won 16-14. Remember that game? Buffalo had a monster fourth quarter that gave them the lead after being down 10-9 going into the fourth. They scored 7 straight to give them that 16-10 lead, and then Toronto would score the final 4 with 1:45 to go, and all of Bandit Land went absolutely nuts because Buffalo couldn't hold a 6-goal lead when those goals really didn't matter. But Toronto has scored, and they have scored 10 or under only 2 times. They have allowed under 10 7 times. Absolutely filthy this season. But in previous game, like we talked about in January, let's go over some of these numbers. Nanticoke went 2-2-4. Kluch had 6 assists. Weiss had 4 assists. Byrne went 1-6-7. Priolo had those 2 monster goals in the face of Mitch Desnew. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, 10 loose balls, 3 caused turnovers. He is a monster when facing the Toronto Rock. Frazier had 4 goals. Vince 38-52. And then on the flip side, you were able to shut down Corey Small. Bushi had 4-1-5, but 2 of those goals were late. Craig went 2-2-4. Schreiber, first game back, 2-4-6. Matthews was shut down, 1-2-3. Rose 39-53 saves. So Buffalo has been able to get to the Rock. They've won 3 straight games against them dating back to last year's playoffs. But I think you're getting a different Toronto Rock team than you saw in January, because the offense is fully healthy. You might not have a Challen Rogers in this game, but the offense is finally working itself out. They've gotten Schreiber and Matthews connecting, Bushi scoring goals, Corey Small scoring goals this year. So it might, the game at the end of January might not be a true indication of what the Toronto Rock truly are last time you saw them.
Yeah, I think the huge key here, which is just very, very strange, I'm not sure what the Bandits offense does to this defense and Nick Rose, but that seems to me to be the key so far whenever the Bandits play Toronto. Toronto has not been able to stop the Bandits offense for quite a while. I mean, every single time they play, they seem to put up pretty big numbers against them, which if you look at the rest of their games, they really just don't allow many goals to anybody. And then Buffalo comes to town and they just seem to forget how to play. I'm not really sure what Buffalo does so incredibly well against Toronto as far as the offense goes, but that is what is probably the biggest concern every single time they play is just, can Toronto finally shut down Buffalo's offense? And if that's true, that's when you start to run into problems of playing the Toronto Rock. I mean, the biggest asset they have is their defense. And like you mentioned, I mean, the Bandits in the first game scored 16 times. So even on the offensive side, yes, Schreiber might have just been getting in there. Their entire offense might not have been clicking that first time you played them. But the bigger thing in that first game is scoring 16 goals against this team that does not allow anybody to score against them. I mean, the only other time there's a 13 in here, and that might be, yeah. So the next highest is 13 goals. Besides that, it's like 11. So this team really just does not allow teams to score a lot of goals against them, let alone 16 in one game. So even though Toronto's offense will look different in this game and is a bigger concern, especially with the Bandits defense struggling the way it is, or just the fact that they've allowed 13 or more goals in just an insane amount of time, I think the Bandits offense is going to be what's really kind of focused in on for this game. If they can continue to put up the amount of goals that they have been all season and simply find a way to do against Toronto, I think they'll be okay. If Toronto can finally flip the switch and keep the Bandits offense from scoring, I think that's where you're going to run into some problems with a more well-balanced offense from Toronto.
Yeah, I guess the one benefit here is they have faced two opponents twice this year. They lost against Albany, and then they lost against Albany again. They beat Rochester, and then they beat Rochester again. So it seems like that maybe that's a trend where if you beat them the first time, you beat them the second time. If you lose the first time, you lose the second time. If that's the case, that works out in the Buffalo Bandits' favor for both Toronto and Colorado. But let's dive into the preview here. Buffalo's coming in at 6-6 after their monster must-win victory versus Saskatchewan Rush last Friday night, and then Toronto coming in 11-2. Buffalo is third in the league in goals for at 12.75. Toronto is in fourth place alone, 12.46. And then the goals against. Here is the major discrepancy. Buffalo goals against, 14th in the league at 12.75. Toronto, first in the league at 9.46. They do not give up goals, like Phil was saying. So this is another game where if they had lost last week versus Saskatchewan, I would have said this is a monster must-win game because you can't fall to 5-8. But sitting at 6-7, I'm not saying this is a must-win game, but because of where you are in the standings, this win over Toronto would be so massive in the standings. A loss will hurt, but it won't hurt as bad as it would have had you lost to Saskatchewan. So I'm not putting this in the must-win category, but this would be a massive win for your playoff odds if you are able to come out Saturday night victorious.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how the rest of the league kind of shakes out as the season goes on, I feel like that's where the Bandits kind of are for the rest of their season. Like, I feel like they're going to consistently be in that. I mean, assuming they win a couple games here and there, I assume that because they're in that like mass mix pack in the middle, that a lot of these games aren't going to be must wins, but they're going to be, if you win, it'd be huge. And honestly, if they win out, that would be fantastic. I mean, I think they still have a fair shot. It would take pretty much winning out, in my opinion, to get in the top four and earn that first round home playoff game. I think they can still do it, but it's going to take literally pretty much winning out. So, I mean, if you have any hopes of that, then what?
And help. They can't, even if they just win out, they still need help because they're at least 2.5 games back of Georgia, who's sitting in that fourth spot right now because Georgia has that tiebreaker.
But I think, but just to that point alone, I mean, I think you have to win out pretty much if you want to get into the top four, because if you don't, and these other teams continue to win, like you just mentioned, you don't have a lot of those tiebreakers to assist you in getting to the top four. So I think they pretty much have to win out. So if you want to say it's a must win, if you have any real shot or hope at a top four finish in a home playoff game, then I think that is kind of the way you're looking at it. But I think the rest of the season, as long as they win a couple here and there, they're going to be right in that mix of not a must win, but really want to win if you want to keep your playoff hopes alive. So like you just mentioned, if they would have lost to the Rush, this is a must-win and a really difficult must-win. But because they did win, it's not necessarily a must-win, but would really help your playoff chances if you do get the victory.
So before we dive into the players that you need to know, even though we already know a bunch of them because you face Toronto how many times a year, let's dive into our second sponsor here, Mr. Sizzles. Phil, take it away.
Yep, they are our second ever sponsor. Mr. Sizzles, like you just mentioned, at 346 Connecticut Street in Buffalo, New York. They have 2 newer locations opening in 2024, but currently they just have the one, and they are open 7 days a week, 11 to 11, with a brunch menu on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3.
So they do show the Buffalo Bandits games on the television when they're playing. Obviously, why would they show them when they're not playing? But we will be there before the Bandits game on Saturday. Now, we mentioned in the reel that we posted, the sponsor reel that we posted on Wednesday, that if we're not in our seats early, you could find us at Mr. Sizzles, and we will be there. I think we're going to get together around like 5:30 on Saturday just to eat some food, not brag or anything like that, just munch on some delicious food. I'm going to be ordering one of their incredible milkshakes, and I'm bringing my wife, so obviously she's going to be ordering one of the vegan burgers. Again, if you've never had one of their plant-based options there, give it a try because you really can't taste the difference. Everything they have, and Phil, I know this will be your first official time at Mr. Sizzles. Whatever you get, I am at least encouraging you to get something, whether it's the fries or something, with that sizzle sauce because it's absolutely delicious. I don't know what's in it, but it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, because we are going before the Bandits game, I am going to get the Dane Smith created Great Dane sandwich, which is the fried chicken, hot honey, chipotle sauce, crispy onions, avocado, and pepper jack cheese on a brioche bun. The only thing I don't really love on that sandwich is the avocado, but I do not plan on changing the Great Dane's creation there. I'm going to get it as is because that's how he would have intended it. And we also mentioned in the last episode, I believe, the ice cream cocktails. I'm really excited to try one of those. They have a Kitten and Caboodle gin, which is gin, Minky, Boodle, sour, strawberry, and vanilla ice cream, even though it's supposed to be a colder weekend, not exactly the cool down on a hot day you're looking for, but I'm really excited to try one of those ice cream cocktails because I've never really had one before, so absolutely going to indulge in that.
So if anything that we mentioned here doesn't perk your interest, make sure you check out their menu on their socials or at MrSizzles.com because I guarantee there is something on that menu that will perk your interest, and you will not be let down because they're absolutely delicious no matter what you get. So let's dive into the players here that you need to know ahead of Saturday's game. Let's go over the forwards real quick. The righties, Chris Bushi, number 21, Josh Dowick, number 8, Dan Lintner, number 41, and then the Tom Schreiber, Captain America, number 26. The lefties, Mark Matthews, the mailman, number 42, Corey Small, number 15, and Dan Craig, who was on the IR, but it was activated before last week's game, number 25. Their offense can finally pair with their defense, and with the numbers that show this offense can be very, very scary at times.
Yeah, Mark Matthews was obviously their humongous addition in the offseason. He's working out extremely well for their team, leading their team by quite a bit. I believe 20 points with 73. So that addition to their team has really balanced their offense quite a bit and just made them a lot more consistent on offense. The weird thing about Toronto, which is a good thing more than anything for them, but their defense isn't that flashy, but they're extremely good. Their offense is not that flashy, but they're extremely good and consistent on both ends. That's the biggest thing. Like I mentioned, or you mentioned earlier, just only a handful of games under 10 goals that they've, at least had 10 goals a game, and a lot of games they've allowed under 10 goals. So that just consistency on both sides of the ball really adds up to their 10-2 impressive record. But the weird thing with them is that they really still don't have anybody on offense that blows you away. They don't have the Dane Smith. They don't have the Josh Byrne. I know Schreiber is good, but he's really just not playing up to the level that we know he can. He's still having a good season, but he's not scoring at the rate that we know he has the ability to. In their last 2 games, the first one against Colorado, they scored 12 goals. Not a single player, only one player, Schreiber, had over 10 shots on goal. And then in San Diego, when they played them, they had 15 goals that they scored, and only 2 players had 10 shots on goal, and that was Schreiber and Mark Matthews. So they really just spread the ball around like crazy. Like, they don't have a guy taking 17 shots and dominating their offense. Even Schreiber takes the most amount of shots, but he only has 13 goals in 8 games. He's really just not lighting the lamp since his injury as much as he used to. So he still shoots a lot, but he's not scoring a ton. But their offense is just very, very spread out and consistent. As you can see, they have what? 1, 2, 3, almost 4 20-goal scorers, which is something the Bandits are known for, just having that offense that is, anybody can score at any time, and this is the same thing with them this year.
Yeah, their power play is also pretty stinking good, and that's a big reason why I said stay out of the box. But it's a big injury report that's going to be coming out on Friday, and we'll post that on all our anywhere that you can follow us. But this Justin Martin injury is going to be very, very interesting to keep an eye on. And they put down Corey Highfield to the practice squad, so that's giving me at least a little hope that Justin Martin could be okay for this game. I still think he's going to be at least questionable, if not already ruled out. But if you do not have Justin Martin in this game, you're going to need a guy like Zach Belter. You're going to need a guy like Frank Brown to play better this week. You're going to need, even if Corey Highfield's activated, you're going to need a defenseman to step up. Maybe that's Paul Dawson, but you need somebody to step up because this offense is so balanced that there's not, I think Mark Matthews, Corey Small, and Tom Schreiber are the go-to guys, but then you got Chris Boucher, you got the Dan Craigs. There's not a hole in this offense. Even Dan Littner's got 28 points on the year, so there's not really a hole on either side. There's not a side that you can favor like with Rochester. You can kind of more favor to the one side because the other side really only has Connor Fields. So this is a very balanced offense. And then you look in the transition game of the defense, they're very balanced back there. They're very, very aggressive, and they turn the ball over like crazy. Mitch DeStew, number 12. Brad Cree, number 20. T.D. Erlin, you're going to see a massive matchup between him and Connor Farrell, and it's going to be Connor Farrell's true test because T.D. Erlin is one of the best face-off men in the league, winning 74% of his draws. Phil Mazuka, number 14. Justin Martin, the other Justin Martin, who's better in transition than our Justin Martin, number 24. Challen Rogers, currently on the IR. I wouldn't expect him back in this one, but number 23, and then Chris Wire, number 55. But 12 caused turnovers, 14 caused turnovers, 14 caused turnovers, 11 caused turnovers, 6 caused turnovers, 25, 27. This team is the best in the league at getting caused turnovers, picking up those loose balls, and going in transition. And this is a big, big test for some of these young, or I guess more inexperienced defenders to be able to get out on the field and stop this transition game. And this is a big test for some of these forwards to get back and bust their butt in the transition game as well, because they're very good in that department as well.
Yeah, I mean, clearly their defense is what they are known for. Again, we mentioned their offense is much more balanced this year, and it is what is putting them at a 10-2 record, and just simply, I think we both believe, the best team in the entire league right now. I think they are just the most balanced team on offense and defense, and adding Mark Matthews has really pushed them over the edge to have that balance. But their defense is what they're known for. Nick Rose is incredible in that. We'll get to him in a moment. But their defense, like you mentioned, up and down, cause turnovers all over the place, block shots all over the place, and just an extremely good lockdown, shutdown defense that communicates really well, works really well. And even like you mentioned, the transition addition of Justin Martin and how well he's already playing with 14 caused turnovers, 10 block shots, 7 goals. Like, just to have that, a rookie slot in as well as he has, and just add that extra boost to a team that didn't need a boost on defense, is upsetting if you're a Buffalo Bandits fan, but really good for Toronto, and just the way that their defense has really shaped up this year, even more than it normally already does.
So Annette is the veteran savvy. He's going to be in the contention for MVPs. Probably going to win the goaltender of the year for his first time in his career. Nick Rose, 11-1, 9.28 goals against, and an 81 save percentage. There's not much more you can say about this man. They were able to, the Buffalo Bandits last time they faced him, were able to kind of pick the corners on him, but that's not typical Nick Rose. So I think this is going to be a game where you're going to have to move the ball quick. You're going to have to try those quick sticks. You're going to have to try those pick and rolls. You're going to have to try to get in front of him and in the crease and make him uncomfortable. But he is one of the best goalies in the league, if not the best goalie playing right now. So it's going to be very tough to beat Nick Rose, even though Buffalo has had his number the past, 3 straight games they faced him?
Yeah, I think the big thing with this, I mean, there's a few obviously, but I think Chase Fraser needs to break out of his slump in this game.
If he
Like this
plays.
is
If he plays.
That is true. I forgot that he was also limping. So you mentioned that injury report's going to be massive, but I mean, the last game they played, he had 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points. Like this is the game that if he plays, he needs to show up and break out of the slump he is in. If they don't have him, or if he's in continuing to play the way he has recently, it's not the Chase Fraser we know. You can clearly see he's frustrated with himself. He knows he's not playing as well as he should be either. So I mean, he understands that, and I think he needs to show up in a big way if he ends up getting in this game. But if he doesn't, it'll be interesting to see just what this lineup looks like all the way through. I mean, this was a big question I was going to ask you before we get into the milestones. Just with this lineup, the way it could look, I mean, the few big questions I have for you, who do you think replaces Chase Fraser if he's not in? Like you mentioned, Highfield going down the practice squad. Do you think it's because if Martin is out, Paul Dawson just goes and slots into that position? And then the other really big question I have for you, which frustrated me last game quite a bit, do you think Ian McKay goes back to a more defensive role, or do you think they keep him as a kind of transition / mainly out of the forward group and staying as like a left forward all game?
I think it really comes down to the health of Chase Fraser and Justin Martin, what you're going to get out of a Ian McCain, where he's going to be playing. I think maybe, I doubt it, but maybe you'll get a upgraded Brandon Robinson, and that will help massively. You know, this Brad McCulley trade is kind of biting him in the butt now. But yeah, I'm almost wondering, do you actually see an Emerson Clark game? Will he be activated? But it's so difficult because they're so injured on the back end. Paul Dawson is currently taking Highfield's spot, but if Justin Martin can't go, I think you're going to see Corey Highfield get inserted, and I think you'll see him up with the taking some shifts with the forward group with Ian McKay. So I think that's the role you're going to be. If Chase Frazier doesn't play, I think you'll probably see Christian Watts activated. That injury report coming out on Friday is going to be so important. And I know it was very important when Matt Vince was listed as questionable and seeing if he was going to be coming back. But I think this is another week where it's going to be very interesting to see what it looks like. And I don't think you're going to get true answers until you get some moves made on Saturday, probably around 3 to 5, where Buffalo typically makes those moves.
And do you think, with, like, I know he's been, created, he's more of a defender now, but do you think in this kind of game, if Martin is out and Fraser's out, do you think they even put a Sam LaRue in to play more of that transition, a couple shifts on offense, but also a couple shifts on defense, knowing how battered and broken the defense is as well? Or do you really think it'd be a Christian Watts kind of setting those lanes, setting the picks against a really tough Rock defense to give them a little bit more advantage on offense?
I think it would be a Christian Watts because they like to roll those 4 right-handed forwards. So I think that would be it, because Sam LaRue is more a defender at this point, at least early in his career here.
All right, move on.
So, Phil, we went over all the players. We went over the past matchups. I mean, Buffalo has won 4 straight versus Toronto. What is your prediction for this game?
Oh, my gosh. I'm going to do what I already said in my picks. I love the Bandits, but
could hedge it here.
Being more of the analytical side of me, taking the fan out of it, I do think Toronto's the better team right now. I think the Bandits have been playing, I'm going to say, mediocre lacrosse for a long time. I know their offense has looked good. Their defense has allowed 13 or more in way too many games. Being 14th in the goals against department in the entire league is just not what we're used to seeing from the Bandits, and honestly, it's pretty gross. I know the offense has been doing a good job, but this is an extremely good defensive team. So if you're telling me the difference is defense versus defense and goalie versus goalie, right now I think the Toronto Rock have it with the way the defense has been playing for the Bandits. So I would love to say that this is the game that they get under 13 for goals allowed, and maybe they'll do it, but I still see them losing. I'm going to go 12-11 loss.
I almost moved it up to that. If you look at our picks, BSC picks come out on every Wednesday. Pat actually struggled last week, going 5-3, and you and I both went 7-1, so we gained two edges there. But yeah, I also have them picked. I've been staying true to what my picks are there. So for the second time all year, I will be picking Buffalo to lose this one. The second time, or the first time I did it was also versus Toronto. I'm switching it up a tiny bit. I had them losing 12-10 in that one, but they won 16-14. I do have some good news. It will not be 9 straight weeks for the Buffalo Bandits allowing 13 or more goals. That drought ends, but I do have them losing 11-10 in a very, very heated back and forth game. I can kind of see it being like Saskatchewan, where there's not a lead more than 1 or 2, but I can't see Buffalo walking out of this one versus Toronto winners. I mean, if they do, good on them, but currently right now Toronto's a tank, and again, I know Buffalo has 4 straight wins over Toronto, 3 of them big time wins, 14-5, 17-8, and 16-14, but this is a different Toronto team than I think you've seen in the past.
And it's also just a different Buffalo team. They are just not.
Yep.
They're not playing as well as we are used to seeing. I mean, their record reflects what Buffalo team we currently have out there. So I think with both teams just trending kind of in opposite directions. I'm not saying the Bandits are a bad team, and come playoff time, if they make it, I'm sure they can make some noise. But right now, with the injuries they have and the way Toronto is just absolutely rolling through competition, I think they're going to be very difficult to beat.
Yeah, personally, I think Buffalo can take one more loss and still be okay. And if that's versus Toronto, I think they'll be okay. I'm not predicting them to miss the playoffs whatsoever. Still think they're going to get in and they can make a lot of noise, like you said. But it would be very tough for me, and I'll be in the box, so I got to take off my biased hat here. It's going to be very tough for Buffalo to walk out and beat Toronto in this one, in my opinion. But I am still looking for a sponsor for this segment, the fastest milestone minute. All these possible milestones can be found on Exit Buffalo Sports Co. We post them leading up to each game, so that will be posted on Saturday. So if you miss one of these and don't want to listen back, you can check out them there. Here we go. Steve Priolo is 3 loose balls away from 1,300 for his career. He averages 6.12 a game. Dylan Robinson is 4 loose balls away from 100 for his career. He averages 3.84 a game. With 7 more minutes played, Matt Vince will pass Anthony Cosmo for first place in Buffalo Bandits history in minutes played. In the Dane Smith assist watch, he is currently averaging 5.67 assists per game. That's on pace for 102. He needs to average 5.33 a game the rest of the way to get to 100, and he needs to average 4.83 a game over the next 6 to break the record. Phil, with 3 more assists, he will move into 3rd place in a single Buffalo Bandits season, passing himself once again for 3rd place, which he himself set with 70 in 2019.
Yeah, it's really good for you that he knocked out most of his
big time.
His list last game.
3 more, bud. 3 more.
It's crazy to think that. Again, I know he's struggling so much in the scoring department as far as goals go this year, but it's just to think that in the beginning of the season, if you told me, he was going to get to 100 assists, which we both had in our bold predictions, and kind of believed that he could get over that hump this year, I would have expected it to be very close, that he would be breaking his own record, getting that 35 to 40 goal mark that we're used to seeing from him. And right now he's just sitting at 15 goals on this year. It's just not very dangerous. Can he turn it on at some point? Sure. And I mean, who knows? He might be able to heat himself up, but I think he's just really settled into that assist kind of player. I mean, last game he had a hat trick, and if he can pump out some more goals like that, we might have some things to talk about. But right now his assist record, if he can get over 100, I mean, that's just still mind-blowing. I mean, even with only 15 goals on the season, the assists and what he means to this offense is still just ridiculous. And thank goodness Josh Byrne is also on the team, just lighting up the entire season.
So the last spot here, NL Outlook, Panther City heads to Halifax on Friday at 6:30. San Diego travels to Calgary Friday at 9 o'clock. Las Vegas versus Vancouver Friday at 10 o'clock. And then the Saturday games, Rochester is in Albany Saturday at 7 p.m. You got Philly in Georgia Saturday at 7:30, and then New York, Saskatchewan Saturday at 8:30. So some big matchups that do have implications for the Buffalo Bandits coming up these next 2 games, or next 2 days.
question for you.
Yes.
It's pretty much just, I mean, it's really just the San Diego Calgary game that I'm looking at. And I mean, Halifax, yeah, I mean, those are the two big ones. So Panther City and Halifax, and then San Diego and Calgary. In your opinion, as a amateur expert, professional amateur expert here, would you want the teams that are chasing the Bandits to playoffs to lose, or do you want the teams ahead of the Bandits to possibly get in that top 4 to lose? Like, do you think it's more important for the Bandits to make it, or do you think it's more important for the Bandits to attempt to climb the standings? And I guess that also just really brings up the question, do you think they have a true fair shot at getting in the top 4 if teams like Halifax and San Diego lose, and then Philly over Georgia would be a stretch, but I mean, Georgia losing that one, but I mean, Philly doesn't matter. But those two teams where Panther City's right behind you in the standings, and then the other one, Calgary, is farther behind, but still right behind you in the standings, where, you know, if those two teams lose, you get a little bit of breathing room. If you win or if you lose this game, it still gives you, you're probably still in playoffs with that little bit of breathing room. But on the flip side, if Halifax and San Diego lose, I mean, San Diego, I think it's going to be really tough to catch, but Halifax, I guess, would be the big one. I mean, they're 7-6, you're 6-6. If you win and they lose, you're right there as far as moving up a position. Do you think it's more important to try to move up, or do you think it's more important to try to get in? Like, what are you looking for from these games?
I'm looking to get in because
Sorry for explaining that.
The head-to-head is just too difficult. So looking at the Friday matchups alone, I'm rooting for Halifax over Panther City, and I'm rooting for San Diego Calgary. I want to have that. You got to get that room before you start looking ahead to try to get at least a home playoff game. You're trying to get in. Yeah. Like, you're not just looking ahead. If you lose this game, Rochester wins it, New York wins it, and Panther City wins it, you're sitting out of a playoff spot right now. So that's why you really got to more look at who's right on your tail rather than who's in front of you. Can you do both? Yes. But, you know, Halifax loses, goes to 7-7, Buffalo wins, goes to 7-6. Sure, but you still don't have the head-to-head advantage against them. You don't have the head-to-head advantage against Georgia. You don't have it against Albany. So yes, you're trying to climb the ladder, but you have to at least get in. And because of where you are in the standings and where you put yourself, you have to at least get in. So that's why I'm more concerned with, you know, pushing the teams behind you down further. And then you can start looking up to maybe you can get into a top 4 spot for a home playoff game.
Yeah, so, I mean, like you mentioned, a lot of things can happen if the Bandits do pull off a big upset victory, and then a lot of these teams behind them lose. I mean, Panther City realistically could lose. New York could realistically use. Rochester, Calgary, all 4 of those teams right behind them could realistically lose. You get a little bit of breathing room, like you were mentioning, to try to just make playoffs. I think that would be huge. And then at the same time, if you do lose this game and they all lose as well, you can still maintain your playoff spot. Like you mentioned, if all those teams pull off some upsets, get some wins, and you lose, you're right back into some big-time trouble. So really big weekend, as it will be for the rest of the season.
Yeah, 6 games to go. The most important one right now is on the docket versus Toronto. So on our next show, we will go over the Sabres. Hopefully, you know, they are right in the thick of it in the playoff race. We'll go over any other news that the Buffalo Bills have pouring out of One Bills Drive, and then Bandits versus the Rock. We'll go over that one. But again, if you want to come hang out with us for a bit before the Bandits game on Saturday, I actually just remembered it's a 7:00 game, so we're probably going to have to go there around 5. But we'll be there around 5:30-ish before the Buffalo Bandits game on Saturday at Mr. Sizzles if you want to hang out with us. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Thank you to Tap That Tap Room and Mr. Sizzles for sponsoring this episode and this show. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Check out Phil's article that dropped on Tuesday for the reaction to the Rush loss. Well, I guess the Rush did lose. Buffalo won versus the Rush in overtime. Subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.